Hello Sensuals, welcome to my channel. This is Liana, Holistic Intimacy Coach. Here we talk about all things intimacy, sexuality, intimacy growth, erotic transcendence, community Q&As, and there are also programs that you can dive deeper into with my work. You can check that one out also on my About tab. Today I have a question for you that I have an answer to a question that was very famous in our country recently. And this was, what is the point of a woman's orgasm? So check out under the video, I'll put timestamps. First of all, here's the structure. Where did this question arise from? What is the context? What is my stance or my take on it? A side joke and then an entire learning that I took, at least, from a man. And fourth, a question for you, an invitation. And last but not least, I'll be announcing the next video, either this week or the next week. So let's dive into it, shall we? First of all, where did this question come from? In my country, Romania, Southeastern Europe, we are discussing, like every year around the summer, politicians bring up the law of sexual education. My personal take is that because it's the summer and people don't necessarily have much stuff happening, everybody's thinking about the holiday, politicians want to come into the attention of the public somehow, so they resurrect the topic of sexual education. So in autumn, winter, spring, we don't necessarily hear these talks so much in the press, but come summer, actually, when things start to cool down, we draw this from the drawer and we bring it up to the public. So there was an entire stance on it with our prime minister, with the political party, with sexual educators across the country mentioning this. There are a lot of talks that have happened in the deputies' chambers and the Senate, so, in Parliament. Voting or not voting around this law, how to make it happen, and so on. In this entire little storm that was created, a Romanian philosopher and columnist commentator posted a long Facebook post, in Romanian obviously, around sexuality, women's reproductive system, women's needs in intimacy, what women get as opposed to maybe what they need or what they might want, how much education we have around this topic. He was even encouraging women to be a little more upset or pissed off or maybe enraged at the fact that we don't know so much, men don't know so much about women's apparatus and what they need and what their intimacy or sexuality is, and that's why so many women are not even satisfied, let alone fulfilled in intimacy. All great, fine, and dandy until he came up with he called men sons of sapiens, and he came up with this question to conclude: from a medical or biological perspective, a man's orgasm serves the purpose of reproduction. Through orgasm, he ejaculates sperm, semen, so that goes into a woman's apparatus, and therefore we have babies. So we multiply, we reproduce, we propagate our species. But as the son of sapiens that he too is, he wondered, what was the purpose of a woman's orgasm? He could not come up with an explanation, because from a reproductive stance, it doesn't really matter if a woman has or does not have an orgasm. Boy, did he hit a wrong chord with that question. So, Vice Romania, we do have a branch of Vice in our country also, and they spoke with 8 women from Romania, not just sexuality educators or facilitators or coaches or therapists, but also women who are leaders in their field, and they had given Vice Romania interviews in previous editions. So now they wanted their opinion as well, just as women. Every woman shared her opinion. Mine was the following. and this is the opinion that I also have as a coach. If we are to look at sexuality just as a meeting of two bodies, then yeah, probably from that perspective, a woman's orgasm doesn't necessarily make sense. You know, we can reproduce even without women having orgasms. However, if we look at sexuality as more than just the physical components, so the psycho-emotional component of it, and for a very few of us out there on the planet still, there's also a soulful component. Yes, spiritual component. There's more to everything that we do than just the physicality of it. And that discussion is definitely still niche, still hidden from the understanding or comprehension of most people. But if we are to look at this from the psycho-emotional perspective, then through orgasm, we purge emotions, inner tensions, we purge, or we fulfill wishes, hopes, aspirations related to our intimacy. That is the entire definition of the erotic. Your inner realm that gives meaning to everything that you do, that fulfills it, the place from where you choose who to engage with, how to interact, you choose your moments of beauty, you choose your staying away from certain people. That is the part of us that chooses actually when we engage or not in a relationship, intimate relationship. The erotic. Sure, we don't choose our friends from the erotic perspective. That's a different part of us, but that is the purpose of it. And I answered to Vice Romania saying that I wish that all of us have in our lifetimes at least one beautiful story, love story, obviously, where we literally and figuratively rise in love. Not fall, rise. Transform, purge in love. Rebirth in love. Yeah, those are big words, but they are possible. And if you are here watching this, then I wish this for you too, just as I wish it for me as well. And I wish that this story is not just one episode or brief moment in your life. I hope that you have this relationship for years. I know what I'm saying here. So I do hope that you have that. And that's how I concluded to the question that Vice, had for us. What was your opinion, or what is your take on our philosopher's stance? So I told Vice Romania, if all sons of sapiens realize that maybe there's more to sexuality and our intimacy than just the physicality of it, then I hope that they have the space to opportunity and place and space to live that beautiful story. And I wish for all people to start doing self-work, because if you don't do your work, and if you're shut down, or you have a cork somewhere in your emotions or in your mind, or unsolved stuff from your past, that kind of an experience that I'm talking about will sound science fiction and fantasy. And it will probably not happen. But if you start to do inner work, and if you open up to love, and to not be ashamed, if it's somebody that you love, but maybe they're not in your social class or economical level or whatever, maybe they don't look that presentable, but it's the one that you love and you know that you can rise together with that person, I hope that you have the courage and the drive and the everything that it takes for you, the strength, inner strength, to go and live that beautiful relationship with that person. So that was my stance on it. I'll have another comment here. I didn't give it to Vice Romania. In spiritual traditions, meaning, let's say, Taoism, ancient Chinese tradition, which I resonate a lot with, or in Tantra, Hindu ancient tradition, these two traditions include sexuality. But they don't include it anyhow. They include it with the invitation and the outlook that it can be sublimated. So you can rise to actually live these purging, transformational, transcendental emotions. In that place of evolutionary path, that's not science fiction. That is actually very possible. And first of all, they conceive that it's possible, and then they pursue it, meaning they stay open to it. And whenever opportunity comes, they receive it, or they take action if it's needed. So, in those traditions, women are regarded as leaders because it is, from the biological perspective, women are endowed in such a way that that kind of transformational, transcendental states are easier to get. It's much harder for a man because he has such a big organ that it's highly innervated, and it's extremely difficult to not get caught up in that intensity. But for women, it's not that difficult because our entire organ is built differently. Our arousal is more diffuse. Our pleasure is more subtle, more diffuse. So it is possible for us to focus also on the higher states. So it is, I'm not saying that this is, so I'm not condescending in any way. I'm not judging. This is just an explanation for why women are regarded as leaders in sacred intimacy or spiritual intimacy, if you want to call it like that. That kind of explanation, I never gave it to Vice Romania. My country is not even in the place where we can publicly talk about sexual growth as adults. I had to quit my job, the one that I was doing before, because I took this path. It was that shameful to my colleagues, to sponsors of my NGO, and so on. So that was 4 years ago, but let me tell you, it's still difficult to bring this topic up in public. So it's still difficult to move the discussion from the physical education of it. Talk about emotions, mindset, talk about transformation, purging emotions. That is science fiction and fantasy still. So if I were to bring up the spiritual talk, I'd be shutting myself out in a glass palace, sort of, and just never come out of it, because nobody would, or maybe very few people would understand or would regard it as something believable and respectable. Sadly, this is where we are right now, but maybe in time we'll grow to understand that other things are possible. We can choose to engage with those things or not, but they are possible. Okay, so the third point today is a funny comment that a man left on my Facebook post. Mine, because I also made a Facebook post to announce the entire Vice Romania article. And also a learning that I took personally from a man who messed up in a situation. So this one is a funny story all through. And I gotta hand it to you guys. When you boys out there make something funny, it comes with knowledge also, and I think that's beautiful. So as I was sharing the fact that Vice Romania asked women to make a comment and give their opinion on the philosopher's post, somebody, I had a few comments, and then one guy commented, when you look at these situations and these discussions, you start to wonder, why do men get themselves in these discussions? To which he also replied, so he answered his own question, maybe because they like to. Yeah, maybe they like to get in trouble and get their balls busted, with some things that maybe they don't do so right. So I totally agree. And here's a learning that I took 3 years ago. I was doing an event. This was January 22nd of 2018. I usually remember dates. It's a thing of mine. I was with 4 women. It was a panel of women. I was going to collaborate throughout 2018 with each of them in different ways. And I wanted my community to get to know all of them. And because we were so many women, I asked the man, he is known for his tantric knowledge and yoga and Hinduism and just neo-spirituality approach to all of his work. So I asked him to be a moderator. And I said, why don't you come and please sit in the midst of us and just moderate the event. We need a masculine presence there as well. It's just too many women. So he agreed, obviously. And at a certain point, a woman in the audience, asked about menstruation because she wanted to know more of it. She had never had a chance to speak to her parents, neither in school. This was a woman already in her late 30s. So like most of us women in our late 30s, at least in our country, we've never had these rich, meaningful discussions with our mothers because they didn't know. They had never had them. It was just shut down here. So to that, Kitty, one of the women in the audience, side note, the 4 women were, one was doing fitness events and health-oriented events. Another one was doing breathwork practices and a spiritual approach through breathwork. The third was me. I was with coaching, with personal growth, and asking all those beautiful women to join me. And to my left was Kitty. She's a member of the BDSM community in Romania, polyamorous or non-monogamous relationships community in Romania. And I was doing with her events on soft introduction into kink. So after we had presented all of us in our work, one woman in the audience wanted to know about menstruation. To this question, Kitty took a stand and she said, well, here's my takeaway from it. I too never had these discussions with my mother, but I started to, because in my case, it was just annoying for me to have so many days of bleeding and just having to constantly pay attention to what is going on. I started doing a practice, meaning every time I went to the toilet, I would push down. So she would also do sort of reverse Kegels. I would push down so that more blood would come out, so that I would shorten the period of time where I have to pay attention to this. And that was a stance that I had never heard of, so I was like, okay, something new. To that comment, who do you think wanted to add something? Our man moderator. Boy, did he could have stayed quiet about that. I totally say that, but anyway. So our moderator goes in to say, if I may, I want to add something to that. A woman's menstruation is the way a woman's body detoxes. And if you're open to Eastern cultures, then in these Eastern cultures, there are many practices where women can sublimate their menstruation up to the point where they can stop it completely, and they can choose through various practices to make it accessible just for reproduction. Boy, when Kitty heard that, she jumped, she flared up and said, what are you talking about? What are you saying about a woman's having toxicity in her body just because she menstruates? I have read peer-reviewed study after study of menstruation, how it's healthy, how it should be monthly, how it actually refreshes a woman's genetic material, and she gives out a fresh material for reproduction, so she ensures the best quality for her species and so on. What are you talking about? Obviously, that discussion didn't go well because he continued, and I was right in the middle of them. This guy was to my right, Kitty was to my left, and they were throwing knives at each other because it got to that point right through me. And eventually they stopped, thank God. Our moderator remembered himself that he was a moderator and wasn't supposed to, I don't know, switch this fists, figuratively speaking, with one of the panelists. So my takeaway from that was, and God bless this guy's soul, if you're not endowed with a certain reproductive system, don't really give advice or give value opinions on the other sex's endowments. Even if you have some knowledge, okay, it's still delicate because not many people will be open to this. Not even, for instance, my Tai Chi teacher, I've witnessed a discussion like this, except there was no man present, when I was first learning about Tai Chi and women's practices, and we were doing all sorts of stuff, and we were talking about all sorts of things with my Tai Chi teacher. And one of the women there in the class asked about what other men were saying about women, how to grow their breasts larger through various practices, how to sublimate their menstruation, and how that would give them more youth. And the second my Tai Chi teacher heard of this question, one of the replies that she had, because she also had a more grounded reply, was, well, why don't we invite these men who talk about women growing their breasts and sublimating menstruation and growing more youthful and so on? Why don't they do those practices? Why don't they grow their breasts or sublimate their menstruation, and then they can come and share with us what they did? Total sarcasm, right? It was totally justified from one perspective. I don't hear many women venturing to say to men, you know, you could sublimate ejaculation and you could circulate your semen and make yourself youthful again. Boy, I think a lot of men would be offended at that too. Whether they'd say it up front or not, they would feel it. And just as women do feel it when a guy comes in and says to a woman, you know, if you do yourself this massage or this type of breath or take these plants or herbs or whatever roots, and you sublimate your menstruation and you're more youthful, more vibrant, and you don't lose vital energy and so on, it's better. I know the kind of negative chords that it strikes with me. So that's the best takeaway, you know, coming back to the funny comment that I had on my Facebook page. Why do men get themselves in these discussions? I don't know, but I do know that I will never start to debate with men around what they need or what they should do or not do. I'm super careful with that. I usually talk about sexuality practices, but they are from a woman's perspective. All my programs are for women mainly. Guys, they can get information and insights, and maybe they get inspired of how they could hold space better for their partners. But from a practice perspective, I'll never do practices that help men avoid premature ejaculation or work with their erectile dysfunction issues, because I don't have the endowments. And it's empty talk, empty learning from my perspective, if it's not lived, translated somehow through my own experience, and understood or translated through my body also, so that I can have some sort of empathy, at least. So, you know, that's the biggest takeaway that I take from questions like the philosopher, what is the purpose of a woman's orgasm? I'm never going to start asking what is the purpose of a man's orgasm, or what is the purpose of a man's, I don't know. I don't even think in those terms. I really don't question why men exist and they exist the way they do. I don't think men should question why women exist and why they exist the way they do. I think we need compassion and understanding and love and other things, and learning from one another, and definitely living together with one another, because why not? Who wants to live alone? Okay. So the fourth topic today is an invitation for you to share with me, what do you think about all this? What do you think about a woman's orgasm? Did you ever ask yourself this? I'm just your opinion, okay? Not go and be those guys who start to condescendingly share, even if they're aware or not, how women should behave or so on. What do you think? What do you like about a woman's orgasm? What impresses you? What wonders you? You know, from that perspective, I'm asking. Or about the funny story that I shared with the guy and the moderator switching knives or throwing knives at one of. He didn't intend to. The woman didn't intend to. It just accrued to that. With one of the panelists on women's menstruation. What do you think about that? Not as in, you know, telling women what to do. What did you feel, or what did you think when you heard the story? And if there's any takeaway that you took from this video, I would love to know. Please keep it constructive and polite. YouTube, anyway, I get notifications of absolutely every comment. I opted to get notifications of absolutely every comment that shows up on my channel. I can still do that. It's a small channel. And whenever somebody comments using ugly words or disrespectful tones, I still see it, but YouTube deletes it right away. So whenever I go to do it myself, usually YouTube took it down before I even got to it. So, you know, please be aware that YouTube improved a lot of its automated capacities to filter out messages. That being said, here's what we're going to talk about in the next video. Sexological body worker versus somatic experiencing practitioner. These are two different specialists and they work both somatic wise, but there are differences between them and I'm going to look at those. I made a mess of a different video. I compared a sexological body worker with a neo-tantric practitioner. And I made a mess of that because my example of neo-tantric practitioner was a totally not healthy one. Sadly for me, I did not have an example at that time of a healthy person. So a lot of people in the comments, reacted, boy, we don't know who you spend time with or who was your partner, collaborator. But this is not what Neo-Tantra is all about. So yeah, I acknowledge that video, because I had never had a positive example, my video doesn't really do justice to the Neo-Tantric practitioner. However, with the sexological body worker versus somatic experiencing practitioner, it's a different ball game. This certification, I already have it. This one, I went halfway through it and I stopped because of the pandemic, but I'll carry on as soon as they do it in presence again. So I have definitely more insights into these two. So check out that video. And otherwise, I wish you an orgasmic, intimate life and see you soon.